Welcome once again to Bible Truth Niagara. Today I'm going to be talking about the character of the major antagonists in the controversy regarding God's nature. The institutional church did its best to expunge church history records of councils held after Nicea which favored the Arian side in the controversy. In order for that to happen, the institutional church that prevailed needed to have many key members who, for want of a better term, could be called hatchet men. So let's look at the key people on both sides of the Nicene controversy with a view to understanding their basic characters. What sort of man was Athanasius, a key leader of the Jesus is God movement? Let me quote from Rubinstein's book, When Jesus Became God. On page 62, we read the following. He was a small, red-headed man, almost childlike in size, but those who considered him insignificant or manipulable soon learned to regret their error. Popular story had it that the bishop had originally encountered him on the public beach, a boy of poor family with little education and no prospects, pretending to be a great preacher and declaiming to the waves. Impressed with the child's ability, boldness, and charm, he had brought him home, introduced him into his household, and raised him to fulfill his ambition, to become the most powerful bishop in Christendom. Formerly Alexander's secretary, now a deacon and the top member of his staff, Athanasius was reported to have written a number of the bishop's sermons and letters. He was equally at home in great houses and poor neighborhoods, and quite prepared, I want you to hear this, quite prepared to use the violent methods of the street when necessary to accomplish his goals. In fact, Athanasius was found guilty on a number of occasions of violence, mayhem, inciting mobs to assault and murder, and financing his campaign of violence by misappropriating charitable funds. Rubinstein makes the following statement of Athanasius. For if Constantine thought that Bishop Alexander was a stubborn servant, he could never have met Athanasius. The red-headed deacon was one of the 4th century's new men, a person who came of age after the great persecution had ended, whose parents were very likely pagans, but whose education was Christian, not classical, whose ambition was boundless, and who was very much at home in the real world of power relations and political skullduggery. And this is the statement that Rubinstein uses to summarize the character of Athanasius. For a similar combination of theoretical acumen, dogged adherence to principle, and political ruthlessness, one would have to await the advent of Martin Luther, John Calvin, and Vladimir Lenin. Okay, now let's look at the other key figure in the controversy, Arius. At the time of the controversy, Arius was about 60. He was a tall, gray-haired man who became a famous speaker. He was a singer and songwriter who was in the habit of putting his theology into poetry and singing it to his congregants. He was greatly admired for his gentleness, personal purity, as well as for his preaching. He reportedly was very brave during a time of great persecution in Alexandria by offering services to parishioners and to Christians held in prison at considerable risk to himself. Thus far I have looked at the reasoning of the Trinity, the history, and the characters of the major players in the Nicene controversy. I have touched on what the Bible teaches only as it related to the purpose of mankind and how Jesus shows this purpose in his own life. But now, let's finally look at what the Bible has to say about God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. To start with, the Bible teaches that there is only one God. This is so obvious to most people that extensive corroborating scriptures are not necessary. Here is one that makes the point at Deuteronomy chapter 32 and verse 39. See, know that I myself am He. There is no God besides me. But believers in the Trinity say that they think that God is a compound unity, like a family. And they say that for that reason, the plural word Elohim is used to describe Him. But this idea can easily be proven false. Gesenius is widely conceded as one of the greatest, if not the greatest, Hebrew scholar and grammarian. He commented on the above verse in his book, Gesenius' Hebrew Grammar. He explains that in Genesis 1 and 26, where God says, "Let us make man in our image," that the Hebrew idiom is a plural of excellence and is not meant to denote multiple persons. The Arabs, who freely admit that they are descended from Abraham through Ishmael, still use, even today, a plural of excellence when talking about dignitaries. Even the Quran itself speaks the same way when their God Allah is quoted as addressing Himself using we or us. Getting back to the Bible itself, Elohim is applied to any nation's Most High God. For example, the pagan god Beelzebub, the god of Ekron, was a single-person god. And yet the Hebrew word Elohim is used to describe him at 2 Kings chapter 1 and verse 2. The pagan god Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, was also a single-person god. And yet the Hebrew word Elohim is used to describe her at 1 Kings 11 and 5. Finally, the pagan god Dagon was also a single-person god, and yet the Hebrew word Elohim is used to describe him at 1 Samuel 5 and 7. So the word Elohim is proven to apply to a single-person God, that is God Most High, for His worshippers. This amounts to a plural of majesty, not a plural of persons, when applied to the Most High God. I'm not saying that any of those pagan gods were the real Most High God, but I'm saying that their believers felt that way about their God, which in each case was a single-person God, and the Hebrew word, even though we're talking about a single-person God, the Hebrew word used is Elohim. That concludes part 3 of our series on the nature of God, and we'll be doing 2 other parts on other occasions. We also are in the process of developing a website which may or may not be finished by the time you are listening to this video, but that will be at www.bibletruthniagara.com.